Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome everybody to Season 2, Episode 62 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we hope we prevail in Week 13 and the rest of the 2022 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. Nick, we're coming off of Week 12. It was a big Sunday night football game. We're recording on Monday night. How you feeling with Week 13 right around the corner?
I had to face Miles Sanders in a lot of leagues. So
did you lose or did you win?
I have one that's questionable. I have two that are a lot, or I have two questionable going into tonight, two that are a lock for a win, and one that is not a lock. But I found out last night I was playing against Miles Sanders. I thought it was in 3 leagues. Nope. In 5 out of 5 leagues, I was against Miles Sanders. Crazy enough.
Well, that's
my arch nemesis.
Christian Watson almost slapped me in the face. I still won by 5 points, but that was a scare, but glad I prevailed through that. Alrighty, this is our Tuesday show. We do the show on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. If this is your first time listening on a weekly episode, thank you so much. On the Tuesday show, we give you some news and updates, talk about the waiver wire and the players that you should be picking up, and then we end it with stash or trash, talking about players that are owned in over 50% of leagues that you may want to trash, or you may want to keep on your roster for the rest of your playoffs. Show can be found on all audio streaming platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. If you're on iTunes or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. If you'd rather watch and listen to the show, go to our YouTube channel, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. First, you got to hit that subscribe button. Secondly, drop a like on this video and any other video that you do watch in the future. Please keep connecting and interacting with us on social media, PrimeTimeFFPod on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, then PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast on Facebook and YouTube. Starting off with some news and injury updates, Deshaun Watson was officially reinstated to the league. He is on the Cleveland Browns active roster. I'm sure he's going to practice as early as Wednesday. And yeah, that's what I got. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about Deshaun Watson in the waiver segment, but that's all I got. Travis Etienne with his foot injury is clearly not serious. Head coach Doug Peterson said that he was medically cleared to return. They wanted to just be careful with him, which probably was the smarter decision. Team is not concerned about him going forward. Has a great matchup next week against the Detroit Lions. Are you worried about him at all this week?
No, if he's out there, you got to play him. Like, if he was medically good to go, I think they were just like, we don't want to risk it. He's a young stud running back.
Yeah.
Need him, right?
Yep.
Like, that's all it is.
Kadarius Toney with a hamstring injury is day-to-day. They are going to be cautious with him. Darnell Mooney with an ankle injury is unfortunately out for the season. This downgrades Justin Fields a little bit for me, as that was his number 1 receiving option. Chase Claypool does get a little bump up. He was going to be in my waiver segment, or I was going to put him in the waiver segment, I should say. But he's owned in over 50% of leagues. But, I mean, what are your thoughts on this, from a perspective of Claypool, Kmet, Fields, and the other players on the Bears?
I mean, unfortunately, none of the pass catchers have been reliable options this season. So I wish I could tell you, wow, Chase Claypool gets a huge upgrade. And he does, but I don't know if I'm still going to trust playing him in my lineups, right? Like, he has not been, like, it's not like Darnell Mooney was dominant enough where it's like, wow, Chase Claypool gets Justin Fields wide receiver 1 role. Now it doesn't matter to me, right? Like, it's like Brandon Cooks all over again, where there's some teams you want the wide receiver 1 and you have to roster them, but you don't feel comfortable playing him, right? Like, I'd much rather have a lot of wide receiver 2s over Chase Claypool.
Okay. Next, Melvin Gordon is expected to sign with the Kansas City practice squad. That is miserable for Isaiah Pacheco owners. It's going to be the Broncos all over again. That sucks. Mm-hmm. He also faces the Broncos twice in the next 6 weeks, and it seems like he didn't have a good falling out with the Broncos, so could be a little revenge game. Oh. And last bit of news, literally hit my phone 10 minutes ago. Elijah Mitchell has a serious MCL sprain, and that's different than the update we had last night. Going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. So he is now dropped in all fantasy leagues. He will not be involved in your fantasy playoffs. And the backups are Jordan Mason and Tyrion Davis-Price. Your thoughts on this one? My first thought is that it gives McCaffrey an upgrade, because I don't think that Shanahan's going to use one of these backups with McCaffrey, but who knows at this point. I also don't know which one I'd rather have as a backup. So there you go. Pick your poison.
My response is you are absolutely wrong. Kyle Shanahan is going to say, "Oh wow, Jordan Mason, Tyrion Davis Price, you deserve 50% of CMC's workload this week." Oh wait, we're going to combine for 70% of the workload. Why don't we just go 33, 33, 33 split with the three? Right, like. It sucks. I love Elijah Mitchell. He's a talented player, but Kyle Shanahan doesn't give a shit about your fantasy team, doesn't give a shit about my fantasy team, and he sure as hell does not give a shit about Christian McCaffrey putting up monster numbers. I think that Kyle Shanahan should go on a podcast during this offseason, maybe this one, maybe any podcast, and they should tell him, you got to play fantasy football and start your running back, so this way you can see how infuriating you are to every single fantasy owner. And I love Kyle Shanahan as a coach. I love him. I defend him through all hell. But my God, this pisses me off.
Nick didn't understand the annoyance until he got Christian McCaffrey on the 49ers. Team, yeah. Now he understands why I've been banging the table like Skip about Kyle Shanahan's coaching methods. All right, moving on to the waiver wire players that we think you might want to add in week 13. Maybe you won't want to add them, but yeah, it's a thin waiver wire. I mean, by week 13, it's probably going to be a thin waiver wire, but there's still some people out there owned in under 50% of leagues you may want to check out. First off, Deshaun Watson. 41% of leagues, and I think they have a pretty favorable schedule down the stretch. Mike White only owned in 2.9% of leagues. Next week, he has the Vikings, who have a pretty bad defense. If he remains a starter, also going to have the Jags, the Lions, and the Shithawks towards the end of the season. Treylon Burks only owned in 37.5% of leagues. Elijah Moore at 33.2%. Zay Jones at 31.4%. Jamison Williams in 20%. I think he's still on IR, but he's supposed to be activated off pretty soon. Zonovan Knight at 0%. That's still an awesome name. And JaMychal Hasty under 1%. Who are your top 5 waiver targets for week 13?
So the order is going to be tough this week.
Sure.
But I can tell you personally who I'm targeting in a lot of these leagues off this list. My number 1 is Mike White. And it might sound crazy, and I know I'm a Jets fan, but his playoff schedule is Detroit, Jacksonville, Seattle. Like, I can't imagine there's a quarterback with an easier playoff schedule. So, am I saying Mike White's going to be dominant? No. But, I mean, I don't see anyone else on this list where I'm going to be like, yeah, I'm excited to start Treylon Burks, even though he'd probably be the number 1 or 2 for a lot of people this week. Or even Zay Jones, who just had the monster, I think, 14-15 target day. Like, I'm not excited to start those. Where if I have a tough matchup for Derek Carr, who's my quarterback in one of my leagues, or, if I've been streaming Jared Goff or Dak Prescott and Dak has the Eagles or something like that, like I'm 100% rolling out Mike White against the Detroit Lions. So I think just for the favorable playoff schedule alone, I think Mike White for me is the number 1. And then honestly, I think the rest of the order could really be what you really need. I think the other guy that I do like on the list, and I know it's another Jet, but it's Zonovan Knight. After Michael Carter went down, we didn't get an update on his injury today. They said Wednesday we'll have further results.
I thought we did. I thought he was day to day or something like that. I thought I saw.
Yeah, but they're gonna give a clear what happened and like what his actual injury is. Like they didn't rule it a sprain or anything. So if Zonovan Knight is out there, they didn't activate James Robinson. They gave him a healthy scratch for the game. There's a very good shot. He's the RB1 on a run-heavy team going up against the Minnesota Vikings, who rank terrible, the running backs, rank terrible, the wide receivers, right? Like, I'm going to take advantage of that matchup. I know it's not conventional, but Nick, I'll pass it over to you because I really hate the waiver wire this week outside of
So I got to play devil's advocate. Would you play Mike White in a playoff game?
Yes.
100%. I feel like if you bench like Dak Prescott for Mike White and you lose your fantasy playoff game, I feel like you regret that decision for the rest of your life.
Not for me, man. I'll ride Mike White.
If you want to, that's fine. I don't know. I just feel like basing off of one performance this year, and you're gonna trust him in your fantasy playoff game that you're one and done. Like we're not talking about Justin Fields here. We're talking about Mike White on a team that I know he's thrown for a lot of yards, but they don't score a lot of fantasy points or points in general. Like the playoff schedule is favorable, but we're not. Are we even 100% sure he's going to start against the Lions or the Jags yet? Like,
I would roll him out next week against Minnesota.
Over how many quarterbacks?
I mean, I'd have to take a look at the schedule. I'll pull it up because we got time. This is our shortest
Yeah,
episode of the week.
we do got time. No, let me pull it
We'll
up.
go off script here. Let's go for it.
No, let me. I need some quarterbacks with tough matchups next week. And I want you to tell me if you roll them out. Josh Allen against the Patriots.
Obviously not.
Gino against, well, I would say.
So here, I'll go to the other side of the ball. I'd start Mike White over Kirk Cousins. I'm not playing Kirk Cousins against that Jets defense.
Okay, that's fair. I can agree on that. Let's see.
Mariota's the top 15 quarterback on the year. I'm not playing him against the Steelers.
How about Trevor Lawrence against the Lions?
I'd play Trevor against the Lions. He's the QB 10 on the year.
Okay. How about Jalen Hurts against the Titans D?
Well, no, you're picking the top 5 outside of Trevor.
How about Lamar Jackson against the Broncos?
Again, you're picking another one of the top 5, 10 quarterbacks.
Tua against the 49ers.
That I would have to think about, but I probably would play Tua.
Burrow or Mahomes, Chiefs and Bengals. Are you playing both of them over Mike White?
Yep.
How about Derek Carr against the Chargers?
No, I'm not playing Carr.
Carr's been good the last 2 weeks. Chargers defense is horrendous.
It's literally the league where I'm going to pick up Mike White and start him over Carr this week.
I think you're going to regret that.
I don't know. Mac Jones just threw for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns against his defense, and the week prior, Dak Prescott put up 40 on them. That's one.
What about Dak against the Colts?
I'm pretty sure the Vikings over the last 3 weeks have allowed the most points to fantasy quarterbacks. So
what about Dak against the Colts?
I would play.
Dak's been good the last 3 weeks, though. He's been good.
I would still rather play Mike White because there's not going to be as much upside, and we'll learn more tonight. I mean, but the Colts have been one of the better secondaries in the league.
If today was the playoffs and it starts this week, you're playing Mike White instead of Dak Prescott.
Yes, I'm being serious. I'm not just saying it.
All right, we'll see where this goes. One of us is going to be very wrong about this, but I'm not against picking up Mike White, but I would not make him my number one waiver target. Unless you really need a quarterback. But if you really need a quarterback, then you don't have any of the guys that I just listed, and that's kind of where, if you're in a 14-man league and you have Derek Carr, yes, then Mike White probably should be a priority ad. But if you're in a 10 or 12-man league, you probably have Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow,
here's
Mahomes,
my logic.
Herbert.
Here's my logic behind it. You're this deep into your season. You are not going to have if you have a major injury to your roster at wide receiver or running back, you should have someone better to plug and play than any of the other 6 guys that we named here. So
here's one. Treylon Burks has 7 receptions, 111 yards. The second game he played. Third game, 4 receptions, 70 yards. Hasn't had a touchdown yet. He's averaging 6 targets a game. Why would you not want Treylon Burks? This is a guy who's averaged over 15 fantasy points the last 2 weeks. This is a flex.
Let's go to the playoffs. So you're going to trust him against the Chargers?
Yes, the Chargers have a horrible defense.
You're trusting playing Treylon Burks.
I have a league where I'm flexing. I have a league where I'm playing Antonio Gibson right now. I would play Treylon Burks in my flex over Antonio Gibson.
Okay, so that's just a bad flex guy then.
But I feel like that's a lot of 12-man leagues though.
Against Houston, who's been a top 3 team against fantasy wide receivers. I know it's still the Texans.
Texans. I'm putting Treylon Burks in there. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle should have both had 40.
Championship week, he's getting shadowed by Trayvon Diggs. I'm not
Dallas. I would not play him against, but again, would I rather have? Burks also has the Jaguars. Burks has 3 favorable matchups in the next 5 weeks. But in the next 5 weeks, he has 3 favorable matchups, and I don't even know if Mike White's going to be starting in 2 weeks.
I don't know about that.
I don't know if Mike White is starting in 2 weeks. You tell me to pick up a quarterback that might not be the starter in 2 weeks.
I'm sure I think Mike White's playing the rest of the season out as the starter. I mean, he would need to get obliterated these next 2 weeks for them to pull him. There's the only way he doesn't make it to the Detroit matchup.
My 5, because I am not prioritizing a quarterback. And if I was, I'd pick up Deshaun Watson, who's a proven commodity. My 5 would be Treylon Burks, Zay Jones, Jamison Williams. Then I'd probably go to Deshaun Watson, then Mike White, because I don't want either of the running backs, and Elijah Moore hasn't shown me enough. I really don't think Mike White's a bad ad. And I do think that he does play the rest of the season, but there is the chance that he doesn't. I've only seen him in 1 game against the fucking Bears, who suck. They're almost as bad as the Texans.
The Super Bowl, the AFC representing Bengals last year. We put up monster stats with a worse score.
Well, that's a bad game.
That's a bad game.
Bad game for the Bengals.
He's played 4 games and he's had 2
Bad
games
game for
where
the
he's
Bengals.
in 2 of his fantasy games, 2 of his 4 games as a starter for this team.
But then why did they keep him last
year? He has finished as a top 5 quarterback in fantasy. You can't just say like you don't want him against Detroit. If I take away the name and I give you the stats, you're going to say, hell yeah, plug and play. Whoever the quarterback is going up against Detroit, you're going to want to play. Jacksonville, you're going to want to play. Like, it's worth just holding them and taking a shot.
I think if I didn't stare Treylon Burks in the face this week with owned in only 37% of leagues, I'd agree with you more.
I think he only had 11 outside of the fumble recovery touchdown.
I mean, but that's still 11 fantasy points in a game that was just low scoring. The Bengals D is really good.
I'll take Mike White's top 5 quarterback game against Detroit. I'd rather play that matchup. I was very high on Treylon Burks going into the year. I said Tennessee was going to need it. They gave him a first-round pick to go get him. Like, I still have zero confidence in that passing game.
If the Bills, if the Bills obliterate Mike White, they could go back to Zach Wilson for Detroit.
I don't think so.
I know you don't think so. I'm just saying.
If they did that. I don't think Zach's going to see another start as the quarterback for the Jets.
No, there you go. Okay, so would you even have a top 5, or is it just Mike White and the rest?
My number 1 outside, I'm going to take Mike White also. My number 1's Mike White. Number 2 would probably be Zay Jones. And then that would really be it. I really don't think I'd want to roster anyone
You
else.
want no part of Treylon Burks?
No, and we'll get into it in Stash or Trash. I'd rather roster every single player on this list outside of over it.
Okay, that's fine. All right. You don't want Deshaun Watson. You haven't seen enough of him.
No, I refuse to win my championship with Deshaun Watson on my team.
Because of allegations or because of just
purely off the cause? I won't do it personally. Not for me.
All right. I want to win money.
If you're willing to win your money and you don't care, like, go for it. But
$1,000 is very helpful when you have rent. I would I will roster Deshaun Watson if I need to. Just saying. I'm not playing for fun here, guys.
I don't think he's available in most of the competitive leagues.
I'm a 12-0 in a league. Like, I want to win. Now my quarterback is hurt, so I probably won't even pick up Watson. But anyway, point being, I want to win. All right, moving on to Stash or Trash. Going to talk about players that are owned in over 70% of leagues, 50% of leagues, and if you should drop them or if you should keep them. Curtis Samuel, 70%. 71%.
Let me preface the segment by saying, for me, it's Mike White, Zay Jones, or this guy. I would drop Curtis Samuel for those 2.
I will drop Curtis Samuel for Treylon Burks for sure. Antonio Gibson at 89%. I would keep him over just about every waiver ad except maybe Treylon Burks.
If you need a quarterback, Mike White over him, but if not, then keep Gibson.
Rondale Moore, 65%. For me, he's not rosterable at this point when he's playing behind 2 star-studded receivers.
Yep, totally agree.
Tyler Higbee at 85%. Look at the colors on his jersey and look at the logo that he's representing. You don't want him.
Nope, totally agree.
Kareem Hunt at 80%.
If you were held him this long, you're holding him to be the handcuff. So
yeah,
if you believed in him for 12, 13 weeks, God bless you and keep him on that bench. Like, he's going to stay there.
I will drop Russell Wilson for Mike White.
100%.
He should be rostered.
I can't believe he's rostered in 51. I literally looked because this is his first fantasy game under 10 points like this year. Like, he's had a lot under 15 points. But, like, I literally was like, there's no way Russ is owned at 51% or 50 or over percent. And he was. And I was like, come on, guys. Like, come on.
Me and a friend both had to play Russell Wilson the last 2 weeks due to Kyler being out. And he played him this week because somebody else was out. And it's just like, he's riding on the name. Like, it's the name at this point.
Yep.
And like, I started Russell Wilson over like other guys on the waiver wire. And I probably shouldn't have. But anyway, Dawson Knox at 80%. I said keep him because tight end is just like, I'm in a situation where like my tight ends were Kyle Pitts and Evan Ingram, and now I'm scrambling for another tight end. So
yeah, I've lost Pitts, Ertz, Goddard so far this year. Like, I think the position has thinned out now with those injuries, so I do think you still should own him.
Okay. Kadarius Toney at 57%.
This is I love this question because
I don't want to drop him now. He's day to day, and like if he plays this week or next week, like I don't think he's going on IR, so I'll keep him.
It's so tough, but I think I'd rather own Zay and Mike White than Tony.
I would no, I would not rather own Zay Jones.
Zay is the proven number 2 weapon.
Kadarius Toney has the Seahawks in week 16.
Mike White has him
And
in 17,
Houston.
and you don't trust Mike White.
You're right. So I don't know if Mike White's going to be the starter, and the Jets
And
don't score a lot of fantasy points.
We also don't know if Kadarius Toney's going to outsnap Mecole Hardman when he gets back from IR, MVS.
I think he will.
He's
They
not
traded
outsnapping
for him.
Juju.
I think he will.
Sky Moore might not outsnap him, but will eat into target share. They just picked up another wide receiver in like Brian Edwards. Like,
I have more faith in Kadarius Toney than I do in Mike White scoring more fantasy points for the rest of the season.
I will bet Mike White scores more points the rest of the season than Kadarius Toney.
I shouldn't take that bet. He's a quarterback. He's going to.
You're damn right. You should take that bet.
You should never take that bet with a quarterback. Really, quarterbacks most of the time will score more unless you have like Derrick Henry or something like that.
Yeah.
There's no way to actually do this bet to make it fair, but I think in terms of position value, Kadarius Toney would average more points than Mike White. There's no way to actually do this bet, but I think that in terms of like the wide receiver position, Kadarius Toney will have a better average.
Well, the bet would really be like, is Mike White, like Mike White would have to rank almost like 2.5 times higher. So if Mike White ranked like a top 10 quarterback rest of the season, Tony would need to rank inside the top 24,
25 or something. Yeah. So
exactly.
There's no way to actually do it. But my point being, I think if you had Kadarius Toney on your team and Mike White on your team, and you had another solid quarterback like Dak, I think Tony starts more weeks than Mike White does.
Fair.
Cam Akers at 57%. Same thing as Tyler Higbee. Look at the logo he's wearing. You don't want it.
Yep. Stop riding the Super Bowl high, guys.
Yep.
Cut him.
Drake London, 75%. Same thing we've been saying all season. If it's Keeper League.
He's been on the segment since week 5. Like,
people don't want to cut him.
I don't get it.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's because people cut Amon-Ra early last year and they're afraid because he broke out in the last 5 games. Maybe, but I don't know. Brandon Cooks, 81%. He's a Texan.
Yep. He's out targeted.
The Texans are next year, April 29th or whatever the day is.
Oh yeah. Big time.
Number one.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That was Stash or Trash, and this was a fun show. Thank you guys for listening to this one. Thanks for watching this one. We do enjoy bantering and having fun with it. So hopefully you enjoy it too. If you enjoyed the show and you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. If you're on YouTube, drop a like on this video, hit a sub, let your friends know. We'd appreciate that. Keep connecting with us on social media, PrimeTimeFFPod, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, then Facebook and YouTube, Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Thanks for listening. Best of luck on your waiver wire, and best of luck in Week 13.